Are you ready?
Hello, and welcome to the Whole House Podcast, where you can find home, health, and family all in one place. Our team is comprised of moms from different upbringings and backgrounds, and we each have different passions and giftings and strengths. We each represent a different room, and we all make up the whole house. So grab a cup of coffee and join our overly caffeinated ladies here for the Whole House Podcast.
Hi, and welcome to the Whole House Podcast. Today it's Kathleen, and I have a special guest, my husband, Jerry.
Hey, everyone.
Today we're going to be talking about the challenges and rewards of homeschooling adopted children. Now, I'm going to start with saying that we have 7 children. 4 of them are adopted, and they are a sibling group. So we adopted a sibling group of 4 from Poland a long time ago, before some of you were born. So we have some experience with this. And when we did adopt our children, we were already homeschooling, and our reasonings for homeschooling changed a little bit after the adoption. So we just have some points we're going to work through. So if you're thinking about homeschooling your adopted child, I know you often can't. If they're foster children, that's a little bit different. I wish that would change, but I'm not in charge of that. So I'm going to let Jerry share his first point, and we'll get going.
All right. Well, I'm going to mention several points that I want to bring up today, and then I'll come back to the first point. Some of the things that I think about, and this goes for whether the child is internationally adopted or adopted domestically, and they know the English language, because there's still similar issues, and we'll get into it and explain that. Number 1, you have a language barrier. Number 2, acclimation to a home or a family, or normalization, possibly for the first time in their life. Number 3, the grade level they need to start at. It's going to be different for children that are coming from hard places and being adopted, especially in the international community, because it's things are a little different where they're coming from. They have different challenges. And then emotional age versus physical age. And there's a whole bunch of stuff in each of these that I'll hopefully get a chance to talk about. But I'm going to bounce back now to the language barrier, because I think that it's perfect common sense for to talk about language barrier with children coming from another country where they haven't been taught English or very, very little English. I don't know that you can send them into a private or public school setting because they're not going to get or understand a whole bunch of things that the teachers are talking about, the kids are talking about. And one of the great dangers there is going to make them feel more awkward, more shy, more out of place. It's just not a great, I don't think it's a great idea to put them into a public school setting or a private school setting. Homeschooling lets them stay in their comfort zone and a lot of other things when it comes to normalization of family, which we'll get to in another point. But
okay. Well, can I add something? Sure. Jerry's taking over. Well, I will say, in addition to that, kids that are adopted domestically have a different cultural language. So it is they're learning the language of attachment, and the way that they speak to you may be totally different than you're accustomed to, or that your biological children speak to you, because they have a whole different history behind them. And I will also say, because he said, we're trying to get these kids in their comfort zone because we're trying to get them to attach. And we often hear as parents, we need to get them out of their comfort zone. We do, but these kids have already been out of their comfort zone for so long.
Exactly.
They need a chance to feel comfortable. And that doesn't mean that we just kept all of our children at home and never let them out and they never experience life. And because I've heard some adoptive parents say to me that their counselors were saying, well, your kids need to experience life. Well, my kids, by the time they came home to us, had already experienced more life than most adults, and not in a good way. So they needed a chance to feel secure, to feel safe. And I will just give you an example of the language barrier issue. Now all of my kids, most of them took violin lessons from a very early age. And so when we were taking a group violin lesson with an awesome teacher, he was just amazing. But one of my kids, during the lesson, this was just less than a year after my kids came home, was not understanding the instructions from the teacher. And the instructions were just, like machine gun, like really quick. Okay, do this, put your finger on A, do this, hold your bow up here. And so this particular child looked as if he were resisting or being rebellious or had an attitude. So he was constantly being corrected by the teacher. So what I ended up doing was joining the lesson with my violin and standing next to this particular child so I could explain to him what was going on. And another thing about the language barrier is, experts will tell you the best way for a child to learn a language is immersion. And I agree with that. But my kids my newbies had that immersion with their biological siblings. So they were here in the home talking to each other, and the greatest motivator to speak another language is if you want a toy and somebody else has it, or if you want to play a game and you need to tell your new sister or brother that you want to play that game, well then you're going to figure out how to say that. So my kids did pick up the language really quickly, but there was still that disconnection, especially in public when people are speaking very quickly like I am right now. It would take them a while to process that. So at home, they got that extra attention in the language from their siblings, even if their siblings were saying, "What? I don't know what you're talking about," So
yeah, but even that "what" is in a safer environment than it is in a public setting. And I'm going to say some things off of what Kathleen just said. They need that individualized one-on-one teaching. And they get that in a homeschooling. That's one of the benefits of homeschooling, not one of the challenges, but you give them that one-on-one teaching and training without them feeling embarrassed or anything. Here's some of these things that people say are silly. The immersion comment, I get it, they learn faster. But here's what I challenge you to do. If you think, as an adult, if you think this is such a great idea, I want you to do this. Google any class or teaching that you want, but Google it in Spanish, Google it in Italian, a language you don't speak. And then I want you to sit there and watch it and take notes as an adult and see how much you get out of a 10-minute or a 15-minute teaching. And that will give you a really good idea of what a child coming from another country with no English skills feels like when they're put in a public school setting. They're not learning, they're not advancing their intellect, they're not advancing what they know, they're actually falling further behind. They might pick up some English skills, but they're still falling further and further behind as the year progresses because they just don't get it. They're embarrassed to ask questions. They don't want to say, "Can you slow down?" They've never been in that situation before. And Kathleen was talking about children domestically from that know English, but they come from different settings. Those children also have the similar challenges with language barrier because a lot of times the words that we use or teachers use and how they say things don't mean the same thing that they mean to children that have come from hard places. And they are really shutting out authority at that point. So they don't care what the teacher's saying because everybody that's been in authority over them up to that point has hurt them in a lot of cases. So they are shutting they're shutting it down. They're not listening. So it becomes a language barrier there simply because they tune it out. They don't want to know what someone in authority, and they don't trust it either. They don't trust what they're saying to be accurate. So it's a whole different dynamic there.
Right, so they're stuck in fight, flight, or freeze, and they're either going to fight the authority or freeze and just kind of zone out, or actually run away. Because I've talked to a lot of adoptive parents whose kids are either in private school or public school, and they just don't listen to the authority. So, and that's difficult because they don't speak that language. They learned a whole nother language, and that language was authority will hurt you. So run away or freeze or fight. So what is your next point?
My next point was acclimation to home, family, kind of normalization process that takes place. And this is this doesn't matter where you're from. This takes place. For example, when a child gets to your home, that could be their first real view or their first real interaction with what it means to have family. But they don't know what to think of it yet because these children think that it's going to change. Someone's going to take them away. Something's going to happen. And so I want you to kind of think about the fear that could be generated in a child's heart and mind when they are sent away then to a school. Now they know after a while that they're going to be coming home every day. But some of the things that I think about here are a lot of times these children that are placed in our homes or that we adopt, they have no ability to regulate. And so one of the things that we have to do is teach them to regulate. If we don't, and this is again one of the benefits of homeschooling, if they go to public school, their behavior is going to be described as disobedient, not fitting in. They're going to be told that they're disruptive and all these things, when really the real challenge is they are just not regulating yet. For example, in our home, we had to do a basket of snacks on the table because, again, kids coming from hard places, they don't know a lot of times when their next meal is going to happen. So they're not sure what to think. So putting a snack basket on the table allows them to realize that if they're hungry or they think they're hungry, they can grab a snack. And Kathleen was really good about every hour or every hour and a half in between, they could go grab a snack. We had one little one that would grab the snack and stash it away and kind of squirrel it away to hide it because she didn't know when her next one was coming.
That was her history,
right?
Not her present. But our kids, you have to remember that our kids from hard places, and if you don't know what a kid from hard place is, and we did a really good podcast on that, the 6 risk factors for being a kid from a hard place and the effects of that. So listen to that podcast. You can find it in our list. But we have to remember that our kids, we are acting in our present and our kids are reacting in their past. It's very, very important to remember. And that's why he's talking about being able to regulate and being able to understand that there's going to be food and that you will be fed. And we're thinking, well, we know that we're going to have another meal. Well, these kids don't know that because they don't have that history.
Right.
So like Jerry said, we actually, we would eat breakfast before we started school, and then just a couple hours into school, we had a snack break. And we did that often because my kids needed to know there was food, it was going to keep coming. And they also, in order to regulate, kids from hard places need to eat and drink every 2 hours because they often don't recognize the signals of their own body, which is another danger when you're sending them away. Unless you have a really great teacher, and there's lots of great teachers and aides out there that will help with that if you can't homeschool, that will make sure that your child is eating and drinking even when they don't want to or don't feel like they need to. Off on a tangent there.
That's all right. That was a good tangent. Yeah, you don't want your child, they already are labeled. In their mind they're labeled, and in society a lot of times they're labeled. People react differently. They just do. And they don't know the history, and a lot of people don't take the time to understand the challenges these children have. So you want to give them every benefit of education that you can, so they can change their lives moving forward. So going back to this thing about regulation and snack and labeling, those are things that I think hurt children if they don't get them. If they get the labeling, it hurts them. If they don't get the snacks and the hydration and they don't learn how to regulate, it hurts them. But regulation, it comes down to more than just snacks and hydration and those kind of things. It's also, a lot of these children don't know how to behave when they're told certain things. No, for example, or not now, or whatever the simple command is, or the simple request, say it's from a teacher or even from us as parents, they would have just hostile reactions almost sometimes, or very what I would call disabling reactions, where they would just melt down when they heard, and when they would hear an answer they didn't want, or they were told that it was wrong or something like that, because they've been told their whole life they're stupid. They've been told they don't count. They've been told they don't matter. And so to miss a problem or miss something in a school setting without the assurance right there of that one-on-one, hey, it's okay, we're going to get through this, you're not dumb, it's just different for you, you don't get it right now because the language is different, it's a new challenge. They absolutely need that reassurance that they have value and they are smart. No one needs to go through life being told they're dumb and they have a label their whole life.
Right. And just a reminder, in case you didn't hear that podcast on the 6 risk factors, neglect tells a child you don't exist. So a child who believes he doesn't exist is going to do everything he can to make sure you notice that he does exist. They're not doing it intentionally. It's all subconscious. And abuse says you don't matter. In other words, you don't have value. So these kids have these belief systems already ingrained in them when they come home to us. And that's what he's talking about. That's what they're reacting from. And if you are a mom and you are a dad and you're struggling with this because your child is melting down, and when you tell them no or give them an instruction and they're not following it, they're just running away or being fight, flight, or freeze, one of those, and you think that they're doing it intentionally, or they're trying to get your goat, or they know what your buttons are, it's not that they're doing it intentionally. They're acting out of their own belief, just like any of us act out of our own belief. And you think about it in the simplest terms. When you sit down in a chair in your home, your belief is that that chair will hold you. That's just a very simple way to look at a belief. Well, if your belief is that adults hurt you, they don't feed you, or they ignore you and you don't matter, or they've told you repeatedly that you don't matter and that you're stupid and I wish I never had you, or whatever those parents in those abusive or neglectful situations could have told your child, then that's what your child's going to believe. And they're not going to believe you if you say at one time, oh, you're special, you're wonderful, you're valuable. They're going to watch you like a hawk for years and years, and you have to keep investing in that child and saying the right things and behaving the right way towards them. Even when they emotionally wound you, you just have to get back up again. Go in the bathroom and cry if you need to. Call a friend, text a friend, pray. Do all of those things and then just get back up and keep going.
One of the other things I should point out is I am not, and Kathleen and I aren't saying that teachers don't care about children and they can't do a good job. But you got to remember, in a classroom setting in today's world, there are 22 to 28, whatever the number is, children in a class. And it does go up because some school systems and districts are challenged to have teachers, but they can't give you, or they can't give your child the one-on-one attention that they need to help them get caught up from where they are. or where they're starting, because a lot of times these children are starting way, way back from where the other kids are, which we'll get to in the next topic. So that's something that the teachers are good, but they can't do the one-on-one that the kids so desperately need.
Right. I had that in my notes too. Homeschooling, we understand that homeschooling is not for everyone. We're doing this podcast to just tell you the benefits and the challenges. And I'm not knocking the school system, because we both come from a family full of hardworking educators. So if you decide to homeschool your adopted child, it should be based on what he needs, not what other people expect of you. And you're not, just because you decide to homeschool is not saying that every educator out there doesn't know what they're doing. That's the opposite. So you choose the best choice for you and for your child long term, and enjoy the journey. You can enjoy that time with your child. So what was your next point?
Well, I'm going to say one final thing on the thing about acclimation to the home, family normalization, and the whole process of regulating. The thing I would say there is that the thing that Kathleen was able to do in a home setting school was she was able to let the kids also exercise. She was able to let them get up, run around the house for a lap, go out, because they needed to get that out of their system before they could focus. And so that's probably a whole nother topic about the need for exercise and the need to release certain emotions. But anyway, I wanted to bring that up just because kids can't sit still. A lot of these kids cannot sit still and when they come from hard places. So my next thing is the grade level they actually need to start at. That's a real tricky one, because a lot of times the school systems, if they're a certain age, they go in a certain grade. And also, because I have talked to my brother who teaches, I've talked to other teachers, they are frustrated with a lot of the school systems right now, because the age determines the grade, not their ability, what they've learned. So, and they are told to process and push kids through no matter what. I hope I'm not getting my brother in trouble for telling him this, what their administrators tell them. They're not allowed to fail kids anymore. And not that I want my child to fail. I don't want any of them to fail, but I don't want them to be pushed through or be placed in a grade just because of an age. Right,
and that is one of the benefits of homeschooling, is that you can school to the level of your child and not their age.
Right.
And whenever we adopted the sibling group before I taught 4 kids to read in 1 year, and one of them was 8 years old, because he already had learned to read in his native language, and he had to start all over again and learn the American alphabet and learn how to write and how to read and all of those things. So
not only did he have to learn it all over again, sorry to interrupt you, honey, but he had the hardest time learning it, because he had to unlearn and then learn again. Sorry. Right.
He had to unlearn and learn again. Well, and he already had some learning challenges learning his native language, which his teachers had let us know. So anyway, but I can't even imagine how embarrassed he would have been being in grade 3 and not be able to read in the public or private school system. But at home, he was learning with his siblings, and
he didn't know any wiser. He just thought it was normal.
And he did great. And one of the things I did during that season of my life was, a friend of mine, Selena Campbell, used to come over a couple times a week and just listen to kids, beginning readers, stutter through reading to help them along the way. So that was one of my points, is make sure if you need outside help that you get outside help. You don't have to do this alone. Homeschooling doesn't mean you hunker down in the basement and don't let anybody in. No, it means that you have so many resources available to you, and you can reach out and find them in your community, and you can pick and choose what your child needs. So, moving on.
Well, I want to say, like, for this grade level that they should start at, these children, and again, this part doesn't matter where they're from America, from another country, it does not matter. In most of these cases, school was not their primary focus in their life. It was survival. It was what's going to happen next to me. So they come from an area where school just isn't a focus. So that really affects their grade level. And also, we've talked to a lot of people recently where school, the kids missed a lot of school just because it can be a health reason. In our case, some of our kids were health reasons. They just weren't in school for 3 or 4 months or a half a year. And no one telling them to get ready and then making them go to school. This happens all the time in America, and these kids before CPS or a parent or a grandparent comes in and kind of rescues them.
Right, because often the child's main goal at that time is to survive. And that survival may mean looking through neighbors' trash cans. I mean, it can be pretty horrific. So then these kids come home to us, and that's where we're starting. So I will just add, don't be afraid to backtrack. Like I said, my 8-year-old son knew how to read and write when he joined the choir family, but it was in Polish. So he had to go back to the very beginning. And a lot of parents are afraid that their kids are going to get gaps in their education if they stop and backtrack. But the truth is, the gap is going to get wider and wider and wider for that child, and more frustrating to the point where they may just give up if you don't backtrack and fill in those gaps now. It's okay. 10 years from now, is it going to matter if your child learned their multiplication tables when they were in 8th grade or 3rd grade? It doesn't really matter. What matters is that they, at some point, learn them or learn how to use a calculator so that they can move forward in their life and have success. We want our kids to feel successful. We're talking about all of these gaps and dysregulation and all of these things that our kids may be in the middle of, but at the same time, we want our kids to feel valuable.
Yes.
We want them to be successful. If that means that at 10 years old they can finally spell the word cat and read it, then that's okay. You celebrate it. You rejoice over it. Which brings me to one of my other points. I'm stealing the mic from Jerry, is don't compare. Don't compare your children to other children, period. Adopted, fostered, whatever. Don't compare. Let your child celebrate their own victories. Let them feel successful at whatever age and stage they are, because that's what propels us forward. We never propel ourselves forward as human beings because someone criticized us or judged us or told us that we didn't measure up. That's not what propels us forward. What propels us forward is we have a small victory and then we move to the next level. And we have a small victory and we move to the next level. And that's how our kids are.
Thank you, honey, for stealing my mic time.
You're welcome.
Just kidding. Hey, but one other thing, too, on the challenges of it is that a lot of times, Kathleen's talking about where they come from. The children that you get are told and made fun of by their caregivers for wanting to study, because a lot of times people that are in those spots that have these children that they end up losing, they don't. It's kind of a funny thing. They don't want their kids, or maybe they do want their kids to do better, but they make fun of them for wanting to learn and wanting to do well because they didn't, or because they couldn't, or whatever. So they say that, school's stupid, or they'll say other things like that. But one of the benefits I want to get into one of the major benefits of doing this on the homeschool level is that you are able to individualize, Kathleen was talking about this some, your child's learning to their bent, to their interest, to what they desire to learn about. We had one child that he struggled mightily, but he loved cars, everything about cars. So one of the science books that Kathleen ended up getting for him was what makes a car work, car engines, everything about cars that you could know about. And that was his favorite category or his favorite science book I think he ever had. And he could tell you about any car pretty much on the road. He could see it and tell you things. I mean, I don't even know. Not that I care about it.
Mom,
but
do you know what kind of car that is? And I'd say it's yellow. And he would know the make, the engine, the model, the gear, everything. So yeah, that was the science of cars.
Yeah, and so you were able to do that. And he enjoyed learning about that process. Now, in learning about that process and the engineering side of the engines and the motors and the things, he's also learning about other things he doesn't even know about. He's practicing his reading. He's practicing all the things that go along with learning that because he loved that subject. So they're not going to get that in a school environment. You have to find what they're interested in, and then they will enjoy learning. I wanted to touch on that. Also, we're going to my next point is emotional age versus physical age. There's a whole bunch to talk about there. But these two kind of blend together a little bit. Grade level they need to start at, and emotional age versus physical age. And I wrote down a couple things that I want to just say, and I think it will be helpful. We had a child that could not remember from one day to the next day the lessons that they learned. Now that is not that's not because he didn't want to.
Right.
He could not.
Right.
And
that's the executive function of the brain not working properly.
See, Kathleen has all the technical terms. I have all the layman terms. But he couldn't get it. And if he would have been in school, because I sat with kids in school when I was in school that had this challenge, and they were labeled. They were labeled stupid or learning disability, and it probably is a learning disability, but they don't need to be thrown in a special class or they need to be connected with and taught things they're interested in, find how they learn, whether they're a kinetic learner, whether they're a hands-on learner, whatever it is, they need to find out how they learn best. We do as parents. So that's one example. Another child, this goes back to regulation a little bit, but another one of our children, because there was no regulation and there was no, never raised their voice to ask a question, they had a pee issue. I mean, peeing their pants was normal a lot of times for kids that are coming from hard places or from other countries. And think about how embarrassing that would be in a public setting. But at home, where you can remind them, hey, it's time for a pee break. It's time to go to the bathroom. And it's amazing how many times they say, well, I don't have to go. And then you say, well, just go in there and sit down anyway. And they go sit down. All of a sudden, it's like this hour-long tinkle that's taking place. And you realize they did have to go, but it doesn't register in their brain yet.
Exactly, because they do not recognize the signals of their own body. And if they've been in a situation, and it's not like they're peeing their pants to be a disgrace to you or to themselves, they've just been in an environment where that was what they had to do, or that's what they were expected to do. They
were locked in a closet. They were locked in a room. They were not allowed to come out for hours. So what are they supposed to do? Well, they pee in their pants.
Right.
It's
sad, but that's just the truth. And then you, as the new parent, you have to handle that differently. You don't want to disgrace them or embarrass them, but you do want to teach them how to recognize the signals of their own body.
And one last point here, I would say the challenge and then the benefits are you're able to help them in the home setting is their whole life to this point. It doesn't matter where they're from, another country or America. they've had no voice. They've had no voice at all. They've been told that their voice doesn't count. So they're too shy to participate. They're not going to raise their hand. They're never going to ask questions in a public setting because they think that nobody cares about what they think about or what their questions might be. And a lot of times when they've asked questions in the past, they've been smacked, they've been hit, they've been told to shut up, they've been told to go. So you have all these dynamics going on in their mind because that's all they've known. Kathleen talked about their reality or what their history, that's all they've known. So to put them in a public school setting and expect something different can be very, very disruptive to them. And again, they're going to act out, but it's not because they want to be bad. It's because they don't know how to regulate. They don't know what to do. So those are some things I thought about as we start to talk about emotional age versus the physical age. The thing is with emotional age versus physical age, to me, this personally was my biggest challenge. And we'll talk about it on a social level, socialization, and we'll also talk about it on just where they are as far as what they enjoy doing, as far as what they think they should be doing at that time. You may have a child that has never had the opportunity to play with Legos.
Can I say something?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me just add something just for those that maybe you don't know this. Normally, when you are fostering or adopting a child that's come from a difficult, traumatic beginning, they are emotionally half their physical age. So that's what he's talking about. So if you have an 8-year-old, emotionally, they're 4. If you have a 4-year-old, emotionally, they're 2 or less. Sometimes it's even less. So that's how they're acting and that's how they respond to situations. And what Jerry's talking about right now is allowing them to backtrack, which I talked about a little bit ago, backtrack as far as filling in the gaps for school, but also let them backtrack in their play. Let them go back and do those things that they never had an opportunity to do. Often I'll talk to adoptive parents who will start singing, the Itsy Bitsy Spider, or doing a nursery rhyme, and their newly adopted child has no idea because they've never gotten to do nursery rhymes, they never had songs sung to them, they never had anybody to read books to them, and those are the kids that have come from traumatic beginnings. That's who we're talking about here. So go on. No,
I think the reading of the books to them, that is one thing that our kids absolutely loved, and Kathleen did all the time. That was part of her school curriculum, actually, was they might not have been able to read very well, but they loved listening to her read, and that gave them a desire to learn how to read also because they wanted to learn more about the story. So she was able to cultivate that desire and that want to read in their lives by reading to them. So you put a 10-year-old in a class setting with other 10-year-olds, which is somewhere around 3rd grade, I think, and they're going to behave like they're probably, they're going to sit real stoic probably, first of all. They're going to be really still. But when they do behave and interact, it's going to probably be more on a 5 or 6-year-old, maybe a 7-year-old level. And pretty soon, the kids they'll be okay and the kids will be good with them. But as they get older, that gap doesn't close right away. It takes a while for it to close. And they may be at 25 years old before they start to close the gap and start to reach the age emotionally of 25, like their physical age.
Right. And often that gap gets wider.
Yes.
When they get to high school. We saw that
almost everyone
frequently.
Yep.
That the gap was getting wider because our kids were trying to catch up in family age and in security. And academically, they were making so much progress from where they had started but their peers were leapfrogging over them because they already had that foundation of family and security, and then they had that foundation of academics from kindergarten on. So, say our 8-year-old who learned how to read and mastered that by the time he was 9, then that was his kind of kindergarten year. So then his peers, by the time they got to high school and they're looking at colleges and studying for the ACT, and he's still catching up in every other area. So that gap often becomes wider during those high school years. But if you do what we were talking about before, if you remember not to compare your children and celebrate those victories. And here's another startling thing. I know this is becoming a little bit more prominent in our culture now. Not everybody has to go to college. And your measure and your child's measure of success is not whether they get a great score on the ACT or whether they go to college. The measure of success is that they are living a productive life and they feel safe and secure. And when they get to that point, that they can reach out to other people and be a benefit to the community in whatever way God wants them to. Not everybody has to go to college. That is not the measure of success. And that's one of the benefits of homeschooling, is that you can track that child according to his interest and his bent, and they can be successful in whatever way that God wants them to be successful for.
I would say, and this has really little to do with this, but on the college comment, I think anymore colleges are not a great place to send your kids, especially if they're not real mature in their foundation of who they are, because they're gonna be challenged from the moment they step on campus to a whole different lifestyle than you've taught them. So it's not you might take the risk of losing them for a season. So I would say that. But back to the challenges and benefits. Those are the major points that I thought of as I was going through this and thinking about this podcast. I'm going to turn it over to Kathleen. She might have a couple other things that she wants to add. Go ahead.
I'm just going to add one more before we wrap it up, and that is when we first brought our newbies home, I wasn't going to our homeschool co-op for a while, which I was one of the co-leaders in. And some of the moms kept asking me, when are you coming back? When are you coming back? And so the point I'm leading into is don't be afraid to throw out the formal curriculum for a season, which is what I had to do. I brought these kids came from Poland. They didn't speak the language, and just getting out a phonics book or that sort of thing, I didn't do that first. I just threw that all aside, and I'm sure that the kids that were already part of the family were really rejoicing over that because they got to do a lot of fun things. We played a lot of games. We played Simon Says. We played You Get to Be the Leader. One of the games I played was I would put a whole bunch of M&Ms on the table, and then we'd work on colors. I'd tell them to take a blue one. I would tell them to take a red one, just because I was just trying to teach my kids that it was okay to be obedient to me. It was okay to follow my instructions in a fun way. And one of the things that we honestly had to work on was just me telling them to sit in their seat. That one took a long time. And if you're laughing right now, then you need to understand that kids who have not ever had to be obedient to anyone because that maybe caused them pain or didn't get them the results that they wanted, that's a very difficult thing for them to overcome. So if you're just bringing these kids home from another country, or you have them through foster care and they've been in a neglectful or abuseful environment, one of the benefits of homeschooling is that you can just shove that curriculum aside for a season, not forever, for a month or two, and just focus on having fun together, connecting together, playing games that have a purpose. So those are some of the things that I did. And so we're going to wrap it up right now. Oh, Jerry has something else to say?
I just have one other thing to say. And it might be, you're teaching the child also. Kathleen reminds me as she's saying that it's okay to be a child, because a lot of these children don't know how to be a child when they come. So they need to relax and have fun and smile and laugh and play, because play is learning. And so they need to have that. But when she was talking about throwing out the curriculum, and she talked about comparing your children, I'm going to speak to dads for a minute. One of the things that's the most challenging thing for me through this process was, as dads, we are always comparing things, it seems. We're always wanting, whether it's to our education and what we did and blah, blah, blah. But I can remember saying, well, Kathleen, they got to learn this, they got to learn that. They're not learning this fast enough. And some of these other kids are at this level. And it took me a minute, maybe a season or maybe a lifetime, it seems, to learn that the challenges that presented these children needed to be, those challenges needed to be addressed in a different way. The formal curriculum that she talks about was so hard for me to let go of. It was probably one of the bigger challenges. And it seems something so simple, but it was one of the hardest things for me to let go of. And, one of the things I've learned over the years from a lot of different reading and listening is that some of the formal education stuff that we use today is not the best stuff to use, even for the kids that don't have challenges. So I would just say, for the fathers, you have to be a little bit more forgiving and flexible and look at things a little differently, because it is best for your child. And I'll stop at that.
Right, and I'm glad that you said that, Jerry, because that's been a struggle for Jerry. It was all along. His question was, did you do math and science today? Did you do math and science today? And that, remember, you want your child to be successful. It's not about them measuring up to a certain standard that some culture has set. So
let me just give you another example of that math and science. One of our children, the one I was referring to that could not remember from one day to the next, you could do math one day, he could get math down, addition, subtraction, all that. He could get it down on day one. You would go back to day two to go to the next step, or the next, what you would normally think would be the next progression in learning math. But everything you learned the day before was gone. So you'd have to go back. So how do you teach a child math that doesn't have the ability to remember the lesson of the day before? It's not that he doesn't want to. Okay, it was super frustrating. So those, you have that situation, and in school, he's just going to get further and further behind. But so you have to introduce other things. You have to
teach him how to use a calculator.
Right, you just have to, because it's too frustrating for them and for you if you don't. And at some point, you have to realize, well, is this child, how much of this skill set is he ever going to use in his real life? And your expectations have to maybe be adjusted sometimes to what they're going to be able to accomplish, or how soon, I should say, they're going to be able to accomplish what you would like to see them accomplish. Your dreams may not be their dreams. And that's what I'll leave with. They have their own dreams.
Right. They're going to have their own dreams. So thank you for joining us today. We gave you a lot of food for thought. Make sure that you comment if you have some questions about this, and we'll try to answer them the best we can. And we'll see you next time on the Whole House Podcast.
We're so glad you could join us here for the Whole House Podcast. Please subscribe, and if you give us a review, we might pick our favorite and send you a prize. Please remember to like the Whole House Facebook page and follow us on Instagram at _the_whole_house. And please sign up with your email on our website, thewholehouse.org, to be notified when new things are happening here at the Whole House. Thanks so much for listening.